They called it a diplomatic tribunal. But we all knew what it really was, an execution with better lighting. I stood beneath the vaulted crystalline arches of the Coalition High Hall on Centralis Prime, hands bound behind my back with magnetic cuffs. 2 of our Nathi guards at my flanks. Their 6-finger claws twitched at their plasma spears every time I so much as exhaled too sharply. I don't blame them. The last time they underestimated a human on this world, he leveled a diplomatic center with nothing but his shuttle's fusion core and a belt full of spite. Captain Elias Wren of Earth. Charged with war crimes, barbaric retaliation, and cultural contamination, the Varnathi magistrate hissed through its vocal modulator. Do you deny these accusations? I looked out across the curved arena of delegates. Hundreds of alien species crammed into floating amphitheaters, their luminous eyes and feathered brows, scaled snouts and chitinous jaws all aimed at me. Some with contempt, most with curiosity. A few, I swear, with guilt. I didn't answer right away. Silence was still the last weapon humans had in rooms like this. Do you deny them? The magistrate asked again, louder. No, I said, but you're missing the part where you started it. A ripple went through the gallery. Some races clicked in protest. Others hooted. The translation drones above sparked briefly as they struggled to translate the sarcasm baked into my tone. You broke the accord, the magistrate growled. Earth signed it freely. We signed your version of peace, I said, raising my chin. You called it harmony. We called it submission. They didn't like that. The room dimmed as energy fields shifted, warning systems primed. Still, I went on, because the truth needed to be heard, because they needed to remember. You banned our weapons. We laid them down. You outlawed our fleets. We mothballed every dreadnought. You rewrote our odes, our schools, even our art, because our history was too violent, too primitive. We gave you peace, and you turned our honor into a punchline. I could see it in their faces, the smirks of the Teldari, who once watched our history vids for entertainment, the clicks of the Zorid, who sold souvenirs of Earth's last warlike collector's items. Even the noble Threks, once our allies, now shifting uncomfortably in their glass armor. They mocked us for what we were, and then cried when we remembered. You killed our diplomats on Harnan 4, burned our embassies, called it an internal conflict. But it wasn't us who started the fire. It was you who struck first, because you thought we'd just bow again. And this time we didn't. I leaned forward, letting them see the storm behind my eyes. You thought you erased our war gods, our generals, our pride. But you forgot. Humans don't forget. The magistrate slammed a claw on the podium. This is not a platform for propaganda. You are here to accept judgment. No, I said calmly. I'm here to give it. They didn't understand, at least not then. But the moment I said it, the hall lights flickered. The emergency nodes under the floor thrummed. A low, almost imperceptible bass note shook the pillars. I smiled. You really thought I came here alone? In orbit, the honor-bound decloaked. A human dreadnought, one of the old class. Illegal, untracked, thought to be scrapped, rebuilt in secret by hands that remembered steel more than silicon. It drifted into the gravitational plane above Centralis Prime, like a forgotten god returning from exile. A signal beamed down. It wasn't a threat. It was a broadcast of what you did. The massacres, the mock trials, the archives you sealed, all fed to the neural nets of every attending species. Unfiltered, undeniable. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was revelation. Because now they knew humanity hadn't vanished. We'd just been listening, recording, waiting, and now the galaxy was listening to us. I took one step forward, even as the guards tried to hold me back. You called us monsters for fighting back. But what does that make you, who pushed us to it? The Varnathi magistrate's voice trembled now. What do you want? The hall leaned in, not just to hear me, to beg. I didn't blink. You mocked human honor. I said, now you beg for human mercy. And the thing about mercy, we choose when to give it. I'd seen war from the front lines, mud, blood, and the hiss of plasma rounds slicing through ozone-thick air. But this was different. I wasn't on the battlefield. I was the battlefield. The moment the honor-bound signal reached the galaxy-wide network, every major coalition channel went dark. Denial collapsed under the weight of truth. The images, charred embassies, executed envoys, the whispering policies of erasure, were no longer human myths. They were universal fact. The guards tried to restrain me. Too late. A flick of my wrist triggered the embedded failsafe in my cuffs. Courtesy of Sarah. The magnetic locks buzzed, sparked, and dropped to the floor with a satisfying thud. My right fist met a Varnathi jaw in one clean arc. The alien staggered, its second mouth reflexively opening as if to scream. The other never got the chance. I'd already used the first one spear to pin him to the floor. Within moments, I was running. Syndralis Prime's grand hall wasn't built to be breached, but it also wasn't built for humans raised in the ruined tunnels of post-Accord Earth. Every polished floor tile was a tactical liability. Every curved wall amplified my footsteps in just the right rhythm to disorient the guards. They followed, sure, but we wrote the book on dirty exits, and the one guiding me through it was already 3 steps ahead. "Eli, you better be out of that chamber," came a voice with a Neurocom link embedded in my temple. Sarah, old Earth resistance, part hacker, part saboteur, part something I never fully understood. "I'm out," I said, sprinting down a corridor lined with floating sculptures of peace. How bad the reaction? Coalition networks are crashing. The Drex delegation started attacking the Teldari mid-session. Pretty sure I just saw a Threx counselor vomiting in a translator pool. "Good," I muttered. "Send the signal." There was a pause. "Eli, are you sure? You know what they did." Another pause. Then, sending it now. Above the city, the honor-bound pulsed. A secondary transmission activated. This one encoded directly into old Earth ally systems. Terran-descended insurgents outlawed colonies, even the Earth-born mercenaries still hiding in asteroid belts. All received the same words. "The silence is over. Rise." I made it to the evac port, only to find the blast doors sealed. Damn it. "Sarah, they're closing the exits." "Someone's jamming the internal override." I'm tracing the signal. "Wait." Her voice shifted. "What?" It's coming from inside our comm net." My gut went cold. Before I could speak, the comms cut. Static. And then a familiar voice crackled through. "Hello, Elias." "No. Did you really think I'd let you burn it all down?" The voice continued. "We had peace, Elias. You're just too bloodstained to see it." I turned slowly, and there he was, Commander Railvas. Once a hero, once my commanding officer, now a traitor in polished coalition silver. "You sold us out," I whispered. "I saved us," he said. "You don't get it. The Accord was survival. I bent my knees so Earth could breathe another day. You bowed so they could spit in our faces. I bowed so they wouldn't glass our planet, Elias. And I wasn't alone." He stepped forward. "There are others, humans who believe in peace. Real peace, not your suicidal crusade." I stared at him, at the man who once swore he'd never kneel to anything without a spine. "And how many did you let them kill for that peace?" He hesitated. That told me enough. The door behind him opened. Coalition troops, all armed. "You're coming with us, Elias." Rail said, "I'll make sure they don't execute you. But this uprising, it ends now." I smiled, not because I was caught, but because he didn't realize what was behind me. The floor beneath my boots vibrated, then roared. The honor-bound's kinetic insertion pod smashed through the ceiling, trailing molten steel and artificial lightning. From the pod emerged 3 black-armored figures, the Ghostborn, humanity's last elite, thought extinct. The lead one, Mira, looked at me with that deathless grin. "Captain," she said, "you look like you need extraction." I turned to Rail, voice hard. "This uprising hasn't even started. We didn't run. We vanished. The Ghostborn squad exfiltrated me through a vector jump beneath the Coalition embassy grid, using classified quantum tunneling tech that humanity supposedly destroyed years ago. The kind of tech Earth once shared freely, before our generosity was labeled dangerous. Rail and his troops never saw us leave. The jump ended in deep orbit over a fractured moon called Virex Theta, one of the forgotten cradles of early rebellion. Once a mining colony, now it held something far more precious, unity. I stepped out of the extraction pod and into the hangar of the Revenant, an old strike cruiser rebuilt into a mobile rebellion hub. The air smelled of ozone, grease, and determination. Humanity. Everywhere I turned, I saw faces that had once been erased from the Accord's propaganda. Veterans, smugglers, refugees, children of fallen colonies. Each wore a different past, but all bore the same fire in their eyes. At the far end of the bay stood Admiral Cora Vanda. She didn't salute. We didn't do that anymore. She just looked me up and down and said, "About time you made a mess worth cleaning up." I grinned, just warming up. That night, the War Council convened. No round tables, no grand speeches, just a cold chamber carved into the lunar stone, its walls etched with names of the forgotten. The broadcast worked, Cora said, tapping the holographic map. Over 50 outposts lit up. Earthborn enclaves are responding. Even the Centauri drift has started jamming coalition signals. But, Mira added, her voice steel sharp, the coalition's moving faster than we expected. Railvoss has convinced at least 3 major species to authorize a preemptive strike on known rebel sanctuaries. So they're scared, I said. They're efficient, she countered, and they still control the narrative on most of the core worlds. I turned to the room. Then we hit them where they don't expect. Cora raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously suggesting. Yes, I said. We go to Arcacia. A low murmur ran through the chamber. One of the Ghostborn clenched his jaw. Arcacia, the site of the first mass human surrender, where Earth's High Command knelt in front of the entire coalition. Publicly, ceremonially, the Accord was signed there. So were our chains. They turned our shame into a monument, I said. Let's turn it into a memory. Cora exhaled slowly. A strike on Arcacia would unite the coalition against us instantly. We're already united, I replied. They just haven't realized it yet. I looked around the chamber, at the faces who'd lost siblings, homes, languages. I wasn't asking for revenge. I was offering clarity. They taught the galaxy that human honor was dead. Let's remind them it's still breathing. As the fleet prepped for war, I slipped away, not to rest, to remember. There was a small sanctuary tucked into the lower decks of the Revenant. Candles flickered in side-cracked helmets. Shards of broken metals hung from the walls like wind chimes. It wasn't for the dead. It was for those left behind when humanity forgot itself. I stood in front of faded insignia, my old unit, the 7th Colonial Infantry, ghosted after the Accord. Some sold out, others just disappeared. All except me. You ever think we went too far? Came a voice behind me. Sarah. She hadn't said a word since the extraction. I didn't turn. You saw what they did. I did, but that doesn't mean we become them. They showed us mercy? I asked coldly. She hesitated. No, but if we don't draw a line, we'll cross the one that matters. I finally looked at her. You're afraid we'll become the monsters they painted us to be. I'm afraid we'll become what they need to fear. Later that cycle, as the Revenant rose from Virex Theta's orbit, I sent one final message to the galaxy. Not a threat, not a warning, a promise. We remember your laughter. We remember your mockery. You called our wars primitive, our pride obsolete, our history shameful. But we remember who we were, and we know who we are. You forged the chains. Now watch what happens when we break them. We didn't enter Arcacia from orbit. We rose from beneath it. The Revenant tunneled through Arcacia's crust with retrofitted mining lasers. Silent, slow, and invisible to planetary defense. A trick we learned from the old Mars rebellions, back when humans still hid from orbital scans under mountains of red dust. At dawn, we breached the underside of the Monument of Peace. They called it the Unity Spire, a glimmering white tower that reached into the stratosphere, built on the bones of surrender. At its base, a plaza of polished glass, where Earth's last generals once knelt before the Coalition triumvirate. I watched the vids 1,000 times growing up. The camera never showed what happened after signing. It didn't show the soldiers who slit their own throats behind the curtain, the ones who refused to bow. But I remembered the plaza was empty when we emerged, except for a single ceremonial guard, dressed in ivory. He looked up, saw us, didn't run, just closed his eyes. Mira raised her rifle. "Don't," I said. "Elias, he's not the enemy. He's a symbol, like this tower." She hesitated, then lowered her weapon. "Good," I muttered, "because symbols don't bleed the way we're about to make this place bleed." We moved like phantoms through the compound. Every corridor, every hallway, every overpass, it all reeked of enforced reverence. Golden murals of interspecies unity, holograms of the Accords signing, sculptures of humans holding hands with their so-called liberators, as if we needed saving. We planted charges at the tower's base, not enough to collapse it, yet just enough to make it scream. The galaxy would hear it. Sarah tapped into the spire's communication node. Her hands moved faster than thought, bypassing biometric locks and anti-terrorist routines. "This place is still linked to every coalition capital," she muttered. "We could broadcast live." "Do it." But before she could engage the signal, the floor split open. An electromagnetic blast flared through the chamber, frying every screen. We staggered. Mira screamed. The overload shorted her neural visor. Sparks rained from the ceiling. And from the smoke came the past. He wore no uniform, just a long black coat lined with the sigils of old Earth. His hair was white, face seamed with time. But I knew him instantly. "General Cade," I whispered, "the man who led the surrender at Arcacia. Dead, we thought." "He wasn't. I hoped I'd never see you here," he said, stepping into the light. "But I suppose the past always returns when we bury it wrong." My heart beat harder than it had in years. I'd idolized him once, hated him longer. "You knelt," I said coldly. "I chose survival," he replied. "I saved 8 billion lives that day." "You sold our soul." "No," he said, voice hardening. "I preserved it, so that one day, when the galaxy forgot how dangerous we could be, someone like you could remind them." The word stopped me cold. "You knew?" He nodded. "Of course I knew. They feared us. They always would. So I buried our strength under shame, our legacy under silence. Not because we were weak, but because we needed them to believe we were." "You built the lie," I said. "I built the opportunity." He stepped forward. "Now take it. Burn this place down. Just don't lose the one thing that kept us different." "What?" "Our mercy." I stood in the center of the tower's main hall, at the exact spot where Earth had surrendered. I activated the live feed. The uplink flashed green. Every coalition system would see this. And I spoke. "We stood here once on our knees. You called it peace, but it was silence. And silence is not consent. You erased our legends, mocked our honor, told your children that humans were tamed. You were wrong. Today, Arcacia will fall. But this is not vengeance. This is remembrance." I hit the detonator. The ground shook. The spire cracked like glass under thunder. Slowly, like a dying god, the tower piece collapsed, one shard at a time. Broadcasted live. The galaxy watched it fall. And in that moment, every species that mocked us finally understood. We had not forgotten who we were. The fall of Arcacia did what we hoped, and what we feared. Across the galaxy, coalition flags were pulled from walls, spat on, burned. Human outposts in exile lit their skies in red, a signal from the old Earth code. We rise. But we didn't rise alone. Violence spread faster than we could control it. The Teldari homeworld saw riots as their own citizens demanded answers. Why were humans branded monsters when their own leaders stood atop the bones of human children? On the Zorit moons, 3 translator hubs were firebombed. In Phyrexian territory, a civil split formed overnight. The old honor-bound warriors declared neutrality and some whispered alliance. It was happening. The galaxy was unraveling. And somehow, that wasn't what worried me. What worried me was what hadn't happened yet. Back aboard the Revenant, Cora's voice was grave. Coalition fleets had converged on Sol. The word hit like a detonation. Not Earth. Sol. The whole system. They're calling it Operation Star Chain, she continued. Their goal is to blockade the solar borders. No entry. No exit. No reinforcements. They're not invading? I asked. They don't have to, Sarah said. They'll isolate Earth, let it rot, then claim they maintain galactic order. Same script as the Vexery collapse. But this time, I muttered, we're the villains they get to write into history. I turned to the strategy board, watching the blinking red stars form a noose around our cradle. Not yet, I said. The War Council convened in silence. No shouting, no chaos, just grim faces, lit by holographic maps of doom. We can't break a full blockade, Mira said. Not head-on. We don't have to, I replied. We make them break it themselves. Cora narrowed her eyes. How? We remind them of the one thing they forgot. What cost a box in a species like us? I activated the second relay map. It showed over 200 rebel cells scattered across the galaxy. Half were small, forgotten, invisible, but together they could turn the tide. Coalition thinks we're one uprising, I said, but we're 10,000 ghosts, and it's time we haunt them. The plan was simple. Hurt them where it mattered most. Not their ships, their stories. We launched simultaneous strikes on 7 coalition archives, locations that stored centuries of galactic treaties, war records, cultural logs. The rebellion didn't just erase files. We broadcast the hidden ones. Footage of unarmed Earthborn children incinerated during pacification missions. Secret discussions of the Treaty of Silence, where coalition delegates laughed over how easily humanity folded. Confessions from diplomats who admitted the accord was always meant to weaken, not welcome, our species. The galaxy didn't take it well. On the outer rim, entire colonies went dark, not to hide, but to declare neutrality. Some even offered safe harbors to human rebels. But the price was steep. The coalition retaliated with something worse than war. They struck at our mercy. In the quiet mining world of 406, a rebel link haven, they dropped kinetic rods from orbit. No warnings, no declarations, just annihilation. 3 million dead. Civilians, children, families. It wasn't a battle. It was a lesson, a voice transmitted directly to our fleet's open channels. You want to show us what humanity is? Then we will remind you what mercy is not. High Executor Vassanael, Council of Accord Enforcement. Sarah was the first to speak after the feed cut. We gave them truth. They gave us silence. No, I said. They gave us a choice. That night, I walked the Revenant's Memorial Corridor again. The helmets, the names, the echoes. I thought about Cade's words, about Rael's betrayal, about every human who still believed we were fighting for something greater than blood. And I asked myself, could I still offer mercy when they gave us only ashes? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. Mercy isn't surrender. Mercy is a blade, one you choose not to draw until you must. They called it the Parallax, a command citadel suspended in zero-grav orbit over the storm-racked planet of Nerith. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something in between. Mobile, weaponized, alive with intelligence too old to trust and too vast to erase. And it was where the High Executor ruled, the one who signed the order to cleanse 406. I was going there, not to negotiate, to deliver the last mercy I had left. We didn't use stealth tech. No point. We wanted them to see us coming. The infiltration team was only 3. Myself, Mira, and Sarah. We wore old Ghostborn armor, modified to pass as Teldari Sentinels. Their outer rim allies used similar loadouts, enough to fool the Parallax's surface security grid. We breached through a docking pylon at sub-zero elevation, past clouds of swirling gas and ionized ice. The ship, if you could call it that, reacted like a living organism. Walls pulsed with light. Air changed texture. Sound came and went like the breath of something sleeping and dreaming of war. Inside, it was worse. The corridors weren't built for humans. They bent in ways that made the mind ache. And every panel, every bulkhead, whispered in languages not spoken by any of the known species. Sarah whispered as she scanned one of them. These are pre-coalition. This tech is from the founding wars. Impossible, Mira muttered. No, I said, just inconvenient. For them. We moved fast, ghosting through sensor blind spots. Sarah rerouted node paths to send our trail through a dead sector. Mira took point, her rifle silent but twitching. I followed last, tracing the path on a mental map burned into me during the worst years of exile. At the central core, the defenses changed. Gone were the synthetic drones and plasma sentries. In their place, silence, stillness, a coldness that reached into the soul. This doesn't feel like a fortress, Sarah whispered. It feels like a tomb. She wasn't wrong. When the lift descended into the command spine, we didn't find a war room. We found a chamber of truth. Dozens of humans, cryogenically preserved. Some in tattered Earth military garb, others in lab coats. One even wore a diplomatic sash from the pre-Accord era. Their bodies were sealed in containment pods, surrounded by coalition bioscanners and language codices. I stared. My throat tightened. These aren't prisoners, Mira said, reading the interface. They're references. Sarah swore under her breath. They've been using them, studying them, replicating them. For what? I asked. The answer came from the walls. A holographic display flickered to life. Dozens of simulations. Human uprisings. Battles that hadn't happened yet. Psychological studies. Tactical models. They've been preparing, Sarah whispered. Not for us. For when we returned. That's when I realized the truth. The coalition never feared our violence. They feared our resilience. They never thought we'd vanish. They always knew we'd come back. And so they kept pieces of us frozen, so they could learn how to kill us all over again. Then the voice came, deep, serene, inhuman. You were supposed to die quietly. The high executor stood on the far platform, tall, draped in armor etched with the blood of 1,000 races. Not ceremonial, earned. You misunderstand mercy, he said, stepping closer. We let you live after Arcacia. We let your species limp forward. That was our mistake. I stepped between him and the cryopods. No, I said, your mistake was thinking we forgot. The executor raised his hand. His guards, Threx, Varnathi, even 2 Terran defectors, stepped into formation. Mira locked her aim on the leader. Give me the shot. No, I said, not yet. I turned to the executor. You called this peace, but it was a prison, one built with our silence. The executor's voice rose. Your species is a contagion, built on vengeance, spite, emotion. That is why you were shackled. And yet, I said, you studied us, feared us, prepared for us. The executor's eyes narrowed. You feared that one day, mercy would no longer be ours to give. I didn't wait. I triggered the surge beacon. All across the parallax, human-coded viruses activated. Sarah's work took years to write, seconds to ignite. Doors unlocked. Systems crashed. Lights flickered red. The executor roared something in Varnathi, but Mira was faster. Her shot hit first. We fought in silence. No war cries. No speeches. Just fire. In the end, it wasn't vengeance that broke them. It was clarity. The executor lay bleeding on the floor of the tomb he built. He gasped through cracked lips. You will destroy yourselves. You always do. I looked down at him. No, I said. This time, we remember who we are. He reached toward one of the cryopods. One last desperate attempt to control what he feared. I stopped his hand. And I said the words that would echo across every coalition channel, every broadcast, every corner of a fractured galaxy. You mocked our honor. Now you beg for our mercy. And the only mercy you deserve is being remembered. Then I walked away. I stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time in 17 years. The sky was darker now. The clouds hung heavier. Satellites blinked faintly behind the ash-faded horizon, and the city ruins of old Geneva loomed in quiet mourning around me. But we were rebuilding. Slowly. Fiercely. We didn't rise like a phoenix. We dug ourselves out of the grave we were buried in. The rebellion had spread like a pulse across the stars. After the fall of the Parallax, the coalition fractured. Entire species broke treaties, condemned the accord, or declared neutrality outright. Their leaders, once smug behind glass walls of bureaucracy, now pleaded for negotiations. They used the same words they used at Arcacia. Peace, unity, reconciliation. Only this time they said them while kneeling. I stood before them, not with weapons, but with memory. In the Assembly Dome, once used to prosecute humans, now occupied by the surviving leaders of dozens of worlds, I told them the truth. You thought honor was weakness. That mercy was surrender. But honor is what kept us from becoming like you. And mercy is what stops the fire from consuming everything. They didn't interrupt, because they weren't in control anymore. We were. And still, even with the galaxy listening, I felt no triumph. Not as the humans around me stood taller. Not as the monuments to our shame were pulled down, stone by stone. Not even when Rael Voss, traitor, old friend, stood in chains before the very people he once served. I did what I had to, he said. I nodded. So did I. He expected execution, but I gave him something far worse. I gave him release. You're not a symbol anymore, Rael. You're not a martyr or a hero. You're just human, live with it. Because mercy isn't always forgiveness. Sometimes it's a burden. Rebuilding wasn't glorious. It was grueling. Earth was still scarred. Our colonies still limped. And among the stars, whispers grew of retaliation from the remnants of the old coalition elite, splinter cells of alien purists, Varnathi war clans, and AI conclaves that still believed in the silence. But we weren't waiting anymore. We were watching, and for the first time in generations, we were ready. In the final days of the reclamation year, I walked through the Garden of Remembrance, a field where every blade of grass was grown from soil pulled off-world by human hands. A patch of earth, seated on every planet where our name had been erased. Sarah joined me. She'd grown quieter since the last battle. Not broken, just heavy with all she had carried. You did it, she said. No, I replied. We did it. She looked at me. So what now? I stared up at the stars. So many of them still haunted by what we'd endured. I don't want revenge anymore, I said. I want something better. She tilted her head. What? A future. That night, I broadcast one final message to the galaxy. It wasn't a declaration. It was an invitation. This is Elias Wren of Earth. You once mocked our honor. You called our mercy weakness. But humanity remembers, and we forgive when we choose to. If you come in peace, we'll build with you. If you come in chains, we'll break them. But if you come to mock us again, then remember this. We were forged in fire, and now we are the fire